Якби я мала крила орлині, якби я вміла літати, я б полетіла б на Україну свого милого шукати, я б полетіла Україну свого милого шукати.
This is the house where my mother grew up, 93 Gruszewskogo Street. It's one of the nicest buildings in Kalusz. Today Kalusz is part of the Ukraine, but when my mother lived here, this was Poland, and the street was called Koliowa. This is the balcony to my mother's bedroom. She hasn't stood on that balcony in 70 years. My mother left after the Second World War, and she never returned. My grandfather, Moshe Likornik, built the house in 1930. He was in the lumber business. He made a good living selling lumber to the local salt mine. My mother, as a teenager, was the only child living at home. Her older brother Herman was in Vienna studying medicine. Her older sister Bronya had immigrated to Palestine. My mother was in the Hashomer HaTzair Zionist youth movement, and she also wanted to go to Palestine. Polish students were demonstrating against Jews, and anti-Semitism was on the rise.
Kochana Broniu,
Dear Bronya, she wrote in 1936, things are getting dangerous, and I want to join you.
Jak najszybciej. Całuję, Ginka.
The situation got worse. The owners of the salt mine stopped buying lumber from my grandfather. Vandals burned down his lumberyard. Then the war broke out, and it was impossible for Jews to leave. In 2011, I decided to visit my mother's house. It was confiscated during the war, and today it is a Ukrainian government building. The Kalusz prosecuting attorney has his office here. The main door was open. I entered the building and went up the stairs. I ran into people that worked there and asked if I could film from the balcony.
And my family comes from this town.
This is cabinet, a very important man.
They looked at me like I was crazy. Don't you know whose office this is, they said. But then the prosecuting attorney himself happened to come by. He just shrugged and said, "Go ahead."
Thank you.
I went into his office. I was now walking through my mother's bedroom. On the balcony, I could see people of all ages on the street below. Some teenage girls passed by. They were just a bit younger than my mother was when the war broke out. I watched them walk towards the supermarket down the street. From the balcony, you can see the supermarket. It stands on the spot where the Kripos had their headquarters. The Kripos were the Nazi police in charge of rounding up the Jews. They shot and killed many of the Jews of Kalusz here, and from the train station next door, they sent the rest to the Belzec concentration camp. My mother didn't talk too much about what happened during the war, But one story she did tell was about the balcony. A Polish friend got her some forged documents that said she was of Polish nationality. It helped that my mother had blue eyes. She stood here on this balcony, and she made sure that everyone saw her smiling. While in the street below, Jews were forcibly taken to the Kripos station. Before the war, there were 5,000 Jews in Kalusz, about 1/3 of the population. In this picture, painted in 1936, shops run by Jewish families are quite noticeable in the town square. But after the war, only 12 Jews survived. 2 of them were my parents. They married in a displaced persons camp in Germany and moved to Canada. Today, there are no Jews in Kalusz. About 70,000 people live here, but the only sign of Jewish life is the cemetery, which dates back several centuries. The town is still a lumber center, but the lumber mills are now run by a large international company that is heavily guarded. On Gruszewskogo Street, the supermarket is open for business, and my mother's house is still there. But no one stands anymore on the balcony.
My grandfather was in the business. He was in the lumber business here. My grandfather.